turned 19, did you go to college, go in the military? What'd you do?
I did some college, but you know, at the time, if you even stutter stepped in college, you got scooped up, and they had the lottery, and my number was 19 out of 365. So I knew, you know, my number was up. So I went ahead and went in.
So who'd you join up with?
U.S. Army.
And so what'd you do in the service? How long?
I was in for just under 3 years, and basically what happened was when I was in, they had a deal where they had a critical shortage of communication security maintenance people, because I don't know if you remember at the time, they were working on transmitting all orders over secure lines, so they couldn't be, and so they had encoding and decoding machines, and basically there was a shortage, so they took a bunch of us and made us into communication security maintenance guys, and it turned out pretty well for me. You know, the deal was that we would, you know, we were mostly attached to artillery batteries or anti-aircraft batteries, so that, you know, we would just make sure that the communication systems were good for artillery and anti-aircraft. But, you know, the deal was that of the people that I was in my MOS training with, there were 25 in a class week after week. You know how it works, it's just a machine. And in mine, I was the last guy of 25, Straley, which is the, you know, more towards the middle of the alphabet. And the first guy, a guy named Bradley, and we went to Germany, and everybody else on the list went to Long Bin. Who knows?
Luck of the draw.
Yeah, just luck of the draw.
So you spent your permanent duty station was in Germany, and then you got out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when you got out, what was that? What year was that?
73.
73. So
in fact, I don't think March 26th. So it's coming up again.
Yeah. So you're. So how'd you get out west?
Well, as I was saying, by the time I got out, a lot of my friends had already graduated from college, and several of them had forestry degrees. And so we were, we liked to climb, and so I went with those guys, and you know, they invited me along to go on a climbing trip.
You mean like free climbing rocks?
Yeah, rock climbing. Yeah, mostly not free climbing, mostly roped climbing. You know, and so we would go, and so we came out west to do some climbing, and people had some contacts in Montana, so we came to Montana and we climbed, you know, a bunch of peaks, but you really have to be selective. The rock's not great in Montana, you know, so we went, but we did a lot of climbing in Glacier, and
what are some of the peaks you climbed?
You know, I can't remember anymore. You know, they were mostly, there was nothing really incredibly challenging, but we did a lot of glissading and stuff on the glaciers, and when you get into Glacier, when you get into that band of dolomite rock, you know, it's good rock to climb. So we went up a lot of places that were, we'd rope and go up and drive pins, kind of the typical thing, go up, and I climbed. I was never really a lead climber. Like, we had a friend of ours named Stuart Radio, who was really the top climber, and he would do a lot of the leading, but we'd come up behind and then, you know, get chased off peaks by lightning storms and have to rappel down, you know, really fast to get down off, you know. So
did you end up staying out in Montana? Or?
I did. I ended up staying, and a friend of mine, one of the guys that came out with Dave Carr, who's now the director of the Rocky Mountain Front for the Nature Conservancy, was working for the Forest Service at the time as a forester, and he came and picked me up one day and said, "Bring your boots and a lunch. We're going to go find you work." And I was already working at another job at the time, but you know, it was just for the county, you know. And so I said sure. Went down to the Sula Ranger Station and applied for a job. And of course, with my set of skills, you know, I didn't have a lot of farm work. Hadn't really had much experience with a chainsaw. You know, they weren't really very interested, but last question they asked me was, "Are you a veteran?" I said, "Yeah, I just got out a couple months ago," and they said, "Oh, okay, you're hired." So
what were you hired to do?
I hired as a fireman, district fireman for the Sula.
So that was your first experience with fire?
Yeah.
Smoke chasing for the Sula District on the Bitterroot.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did you do that?
Well, not exactly my first experience. We had done a little bit because Dave had some connections, and we'd hired on as ADs the summer before and worked for a couple of weeks.
What's an AD?
Administrative hire. So I'd worked in for a couple of weeks the summer before, just at the end of the season, because of Dave's contacts, and then I got this regular job the next summer, and that was at Sula Ranger Station.
So that would be about 74?
74.
So did you get any good fires or any extensive experience, or was it?
Yeah, it wasn't a great fire season. 73 had been a great fire season, which is why we got the AD work at the end of 73. But 74 was all right. I mean, my most salient memory of the whole thing was we went up Lost Horse on a fire in a helicopter, and I'd never, been in a Bell Saloy before, just a little bubble type helicopter. And Tom Anaker and I, who's another guy who was a jumper, Tommy Anaker and I got in the thing, and basically this was back in the day, and we were up on that, Lost Horse, don't you, where the road splits around that big pier of rock. Well, the fire was right up on top. And to get us up there, they flew up, and there's no place to land on top. So the guy just on the north side of it just pulled in the wind and set one skid on the rocks and said, "Go ahead and climb out." And I mean, you literally looked down and 700 feet straight down, stepped off onto the rock, and then we had to reach back and get our gear off the helicopter. Kind of, my eyes were about this big. We never done anything, and this is a piston helicopter with a 4-cylinder Lycoming engine. If that thing had even hiccuped, we would have been splattered on the ground. So anyway, that was my main memory.
So did you do more summers of that kind of firefighting?
Yeah, I did. I did one full summer on the district, and then in the fall, I went to the IH crew, kind of typical, where a lot of interagency hotshot crew.
For East Fork?
The Bitterroot crew, which was on the East Fork at that time. And then at the end of the first season, that's 74, I spent a couple weeks with the crew. And then the next season, I went back to work for the district, and then they hired me onto the Bitterroot crew. So 75 and 76, I was on the Bitterroot crew.
Bitterroot interregional hotshot.
Yeah, right.
So you and I may have been on the same crew, because I was on that in there too. Was Rondi Lay the crew boss?
Rondi Lay was the crew
boss.
boss.
Wow, you must have been working so hard we never got to socialize.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, when did you see or hear about your first smoke jumpers?
The first time I heard about it was, when we were kind of sitting around, it was too hard to go back and forth. I was living south of Hamilton. And so, at least a couple nights a week, I'd just live in the bunkhouse, And Crockett, was there. And Crockett he just lived, we were, even, some of the kids were even fairly young, but of course Crockett would buy beer and come over, and he would just sit there, and we'd have a campfire, and Crockett would just tell stories.
Well, before you who's Crockett? What was his full name? And
Jim Crockett was, kind of a well-known, notorious smoke jumper in his day, and he had been a jumper, I don't know, maybe 10 seasons, something like that, and he buggered himself up somehow because he had a really bad back, and so they made him the fire crew foreman on the Bitterroot, which he did, and then other jobs until he retired. He may have been the assistant fire management officer, but of course back then the names of the positions, it was fire control officer.
But is he the one that had authority over the Bitterroot interregional fire crew? No,
he's the one who had authority over the district crew.
Oh, okay.
And then he would talk about the days jumping, and he would tell stories. So I had heard these crazy stories about jumpers long before, and none of it had to do with firefighting. It was all the intramural activity that went on. The whorehouse in Silver City. Bar fights, drinking beer, just doing generally crazy stuff. And it was as if Crockett thought, oh yeah, we're on a bunch of fires, but here's what really happened. This was the fun part. So I had heard about it almost from the onset.
Yeah. So, you went from there to the Smokejumpers, or what happened next?